Hello, today I have with me Maria Coppersmith with me today, and we did a Life Between Lives regression session, and I have invited her to meet with me today and share her experience about doing a Life Between Lives regression session.
Thank you, Julia.
All right, so let's begin with what was your interest in Life Between Lives session? How did
Well,
you,
my interest oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
just saying, what was your interest and how did you learn about it?
My interest in it started a long, long time ago. When Michael Newman published one of his very first books, either Journey of Souls or Destiny of Souls. And I actually think that I just, found it on the shelf of a bookstore. Looked interesting. I was fascinated from the very beginning. I've read all of Michael Newton's books, but from way back before I became a licensed therapist, way back before I knew that there was a Michael Newton Institute, I just was fascinated by all of this and thinking, what an amazing, what an amazing practice, and what a fantasy that would be if I could ever learn that.
Mm,
And so the reason that I ended up Okay, so wanting a life between lives session is something that I've just been wanting kind of in the back of my mind for, I don't know, 15 years, however long it's been.
mm,
Um, Assuming that it would be something that might cost me $1,000 or more to $2,000 to have such a session. So, I just kind of put it off. The reason that I felt to do it now was because about a year ago, I found out that the Michael Newton Institute exists. Um, Found out that there is a possibility for me to learn how to do this kind of work. And a prerequisite to learning with the Michael Newton Institute is to become a certified hypnotherapist. And that Michael Newton recommends that we go through a past life regression and a life between life session ourselves before we embark on this whole journey. So that was the thing that made me say, okay, I've been putting this off for a long time, but now let's do it now. So
mm.
that's where the interest has been there for a long time. That's the reason why I decided to do this now.
Well, so I'm curious. You said you went and found it on the in the bookstore. You just happened to land in your hands, or how did you find the book?
I think it was actually at a secondhand bookstore. And if I remember, I just remember spending a lot of time at secondhand stores with my kids where I'm just browsing the books while I wait for them to do their thing. Yeah. And it was just something that, as just sitting there looking just to kill time, the title of that caught my interest and pulled it down, skimmed through it, knew I had to take it home.
Yeah. So what was it about the book that was so exciting for you?
Um, well, I've been all of my life sensitive to and open to, the spirit world around me, but it never ever had entered my mind that people, before they actually die and travel to the spirit world, that hypnosis could ever um, help a person to move into that spirit world space.
Mm,
So just to realize that, oh, whoa, this actually can happen, and reading the accounts of it, it resonated in my soul. You know how it is when you read something and something inside of you just sometimes goes, eh.
yeah.
And sometimes it stirs you up, and you just know that there's like, this is some real truth. That was the reaction that I had to it. So it kind of just blew my mind on many different levels.
Yeah. It's that moment where you go, ah,
Ah,
makes
yes,
so much sense.
yes, yes.
So then you decided, okay, now's the time. I want to do this session. I've been thinking about it, kind of mulling around in the back of my mind. And okay, now you decide to do this. Did you
Mhm.
have any apprehension about moving forward and doing this session, doing this hypnosis part?
No, no, I didn't. And I think it's because even though I had never had a life between lives session, I had done a number of past life regression sessions. And even though some of them were just, emotionally like difficult and over the top, um, I knew that I could handle it. I knew that there were grounding techniques that I could do this and feel safe and no, just for a variety of reasons, I had no apprehensions about it at all.
Yes. So then, like you said, that the Michael Newton Institute does recommend doing a past life regression session first, which is what we did.
Mhm.
And then we did the life between lives session, but we also did another life or past life regression session or prior to entering the life between lives. So you actually had two past life
Mhm.
experiences.
Yes.
So how would you briefly describe what the first past life regression session was like? And what did you find in the first one that was most meaningful to you in your personal life? What about it? That
Okay.
particular.
Okay. So first of all, I want to say that I didn't really feel like I needed to have a past life regression just for the sake of knowing what it's like because I'd already done that type of
Mhm.
thing a number of times. But I wanted to see how it was done by somebody who had been through the Michael Newton Institute. Um, and I'm always interested to see how does somebody else do something compared to how everybody else up to this point has done it. So I did it not because I felt I needed to as a prerequisite, but I just simply wanted to. So we revisited a past life that I had already seen a bit of before in a previous past life regression several years ago. I'm gonna say maybe somewhere in 2014 to 2016 was the when I've revisited the past life that we did revisited again. Um, but I saw all new things. That's why it was still a new experience for me because in when I'd done that past life regression before, I only really saw the death scene. That was all. And little flashes of the death scene. But when I did this past life regression with you, I saw so much more of the backstory. How did this whole problem that led to my death in that lifetime, how did that whole thing start and who were the players and what were the factors? And it was really cool because a lot of things that I had been wondering about for all these years about that past life, I got more pieces of the puzzle. So the things that were the most meaningful from that past life regression was the clarity and the understanding about why certain people in my life, this life as Maria, why certain people in my life have shown up the way that they show up in my world. It helped me to understand why certain themes keep repeating themselves and showing up in my life. Um, it just took a whole, okay, there's just, I think all of us have a whole bunch of like asking ourselves all throughout our lives, I wonder why this happens. And I wonder why this keeps happening. And I wonder why this person's this way. And it, just all of those things, a bunch of them got answered for me by doing that past life regression with you, where we revisited that same one. Um, so not all not all knowing and understanding in my experience brings peace, but this one did because it was understanding why a certain person in my life behaves and feels a certain way, or why this relationship is strained, or why this theme that is very disturbing keeps popping up in my life. By having an understanding of those things, it also brought me a lot of peace.
Mhm.
and calm, and the type of understanding that helps to settle my soul. So that's probably really the big thing from that life.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you feel like you want to share about that or what you learned, but I do remember you saying that how real the experience felt. And
Mhm,
I know we did a little bit. I could have the impact of it, and we got on the call and worked out some of that trauma from
mhm,
the
mhm,
from the end of life, from the death scene, working out some of the let's say the connections that you had with your family members and some of the strife and kind of doing some healing work around that. We did a trauma reversal just because of the intensity
mhm,
of the
mhm,
death scene
mhm.
at the very end. And how would you say that the impact of that felt at that time in the moment? Just how real it felt. And you can share
You're
how
talking
you share about that experience or not. That's up to you. But
I don't mind sharing at all. Um, so to make a long story short, well, I'll do my best at that. In this particular lifetime, and like I said, I had known this since my first past life regression, which like somewhere approximately 8 to 10 years ago, um, was being hung as a witch in during that era of the Salem witch trials. Um, that's pretty much all that I knew. And so I had been wanting to know more. So in this particular um, one that we did together, I got to see sort of where the problems started that led to people pointing me out and accusing me of that. One of the things that was so helpful when I talk about understanding bits and pieces and being able to go, oh, okay, that makes sense, and therefore I can be at peace with that is um, I've got quite a handful of older siblings in this life. And when I say older, I mean grown up and married and with kids of their own before I was ever even born. So I wasn't really ever close to them because I never grew up with them. But several of them disliked me just for being born, me and my brother, Tony. There was a resentment about the fact that we were ever even there. And they treated us in a way where we really felt that. We really, really felt that. And I never understood that. Like why? How can somebody dislike me for nothing other than the fact that I exist? Um, then in going through this past life regression, I learned who different players were in that past life and how some of the souls who were my brothers and sisters in this life, how they tied into that past life during the witch trials, and why, one sister in particular had really something against me all of my life. And I was able to see, what role, how, what our, we were sisters in that life as well. And by being able to see what our interactions were and all of the events that unfolded, I was able to understand how her soul could be born with an automatic dislike toward my soul because of what she hadn't healed. And
Mhm.
so um, that was just a hugely significant thing for me, is to be able to go, oh my gosh, that person is this person, and this person
Yeah.
is this person. And now that person's behaviors all of my life, I get it.
Yeah, so you got to see how the dynamics were all shifting and playing out. And then you kind of did this dialogue, I believe it was with your sister in that lifetime, right? And created some resolution.
Yes. Yes, it was really kind of a, a beautiful little technological glitch that happened when my computer died, and we weren't really done. So
Yeah.
you really wanted to bring resolution to this whole thing, and so you had me go through a really amazing exercise of like putting a happy ending to that whole story and a happy beginning, and then making those two things the focal point of that lifetime, and really collapsing the space of where all of the discord and the hurt.
Yeah.
So that was really, really an amazing thing. But in order to create a happier ending to that, I mean, the death scene was the end of that life, and that's not happy. That was so we had to take the happy ending to all of that was in the spirit world after that,
Right.
where then I saw that sister who had betrayed me and was the first one to point me out and accuse me of being a witch. Um, and I saw her being escorted into the heaven space. And it, it was at that moment that I realized that she was just playing a role. She was just carrying out a role, and that it didn't make her soul any less glorious or worthy of being in the heaven space than anybody else, because we've all played roles. And sometimes our roles are really, really crappy ones where we hurt other people. It's true for all of us. And so it didn't, I learned that it didn't diminish the beauty of her soul, of how she had showed up in that life for me, this time as Maria, and that life as when I was the witchcraft stuff.
I do remember you mentioned that a couple of times as recognizing the beauty of each of those souls, even in their viciousness and their vileness and their cruelty. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned seeing that there was beauty in each of their souls, that some just happened to be more evolved than the others. That was,
Yes, that was a huge takeaway for me. And it was a little bit of an aha moment. It's kind of hard to explain because like on a cognitive level, that was something that I already believed, that even people who are showing up in this world as being nasty and hurtful, they've just forgotten who they really are. And they're sort of out of alignment with the true purpose of their soul. But something about doing the past life regressions and the life between lives was something that it made it more real, made me actually catch a vision of what my mind believed just on a cognitive level. Um, and part of it was in realizing like the journey of my soul, that I've shown up in life more than one time in previous lifetimes as a very, very nasty, harmful, corrupt person. But I'm the same soul that I am now, who really tries to be a beacon of light and lift other people up. And I get that feedback like almost every day in my work about, we love seeing you come through the door because it just brings us so much joy. But I'm the same soul. So I wasn't, to me, that means I wasn't a despicable soul back when I was showing up different. I was just on a different place in my journey. Maybe a young soul that didn't know, that still had a lot to learn. And so if I'm just showing up as a much better person now because I've progressed along the way. So if that's true for me, that I'm not a horrible soul because of different things that I've behaviors that I've had in previous life, then that should be true for everybody. That somebody
yes.
who today is showing up really like as a detriment to society, maybe they're just in a different place on the pathway.
Yeah. And I remember when you did the second past life regression going into the spirit realm, you were imprisoned unjustly by these men who were very, very cruel, very, I mean, just so vile and so hurtful by what they were putting these prisoners through. And as your spirit was leaving that lifetime and you were seeing these men that had put these prisoners through such atrocity that they were still beautiful souls. You know? And
Yes.
maybe you could speak to that a bit as your soul was leaving that lifetime, what was going through your mind at the time in regards to the prisoners and those who were the guards that were imprisoning them.
That was that was one of the most enlightening parts of the whole thing, was what I'm about to describe. Is that as so it was one of those gulags that Joseph Stalin had done, and taken a bunch of Ukrainians and put them in these gulags just for as political prisoners up in Siberia, where it's just bitterly cold, like not even uncommon for it to be 30 to 40 degrees below zero Fahrenheit in um and so yes, that was how I was dying. As many prisoners died, was just when you got too sick, too weak to work and all of that stuff, they just have you go and sit in the snow, just sit there in the cold, in the rags and everything, until you froze to death. And then they would make the other prisoners come out and stand there shoulder to shoulder and watch this happen while they're out there freezing in the cold. So that was the death scene. And as I saw and felt myself like kind of topple over and lay on my left side, when I couldn't sit up anymore, and I saw at first could see myself like floating away from the scene. And I knew that that was the moment that my spirit had left, because I was seeing it from up above. And then here's something that happened differently than how I would always had imagined that it would happen. Because I always thought maybe one or two souls would come to greet me and escort me off to the spirit world, but there was like a whole bunch, and the whole sky was just like this beautiful, like iridescent glow, and all of the little things that kind of sparkled like stars were just different heavenly and angelic beings of light. And so a whole bunch of them came down. Um, and but then it was like I was stuck. So this was also an understanding for me of like how sometimes we hear about spirits that have a hard time to cross over because they're stuck for some reason. I think that I could have been, my soul could have been stuck had I not had so much help from these spirit beings. Because the reason I was stuck was I was, on the one hand, very glad to be done with that life because it was horribly, horribly cruel. In fact, I mean, so cruel that when we were doing the regression, I remember just crying. Um, I was glad to be done with that life, but my heart ached so much for the prisoners left behind, because they had become my friends and we'd been through so much suffering together. And I felt almost guilty about being able to leave them, that I was free of that and they were not. Their suffering was going to continue, but I was done with the suffering. And so I was feeling a little bit guilty and feeling a tremendous amount of compassion and sadness that they had to stay there, that I got to move on and they were left behind. But then I also felt some compassion and sadness the for the jailers, for the guards, because I realized that some of them were doing it against their will. Some of them were doing it because just they became indoctrinated to a faulty ideology. And some of them were just playing that role of a bad detrimental person like I had done, like we all have done. And so there was just sadness and compassion for like everybody that I saw down below in the scene. But I didn't want to stay in that life. I didn't want to go back, but I didn't want to leave them behind. And so I just felt stuck and couldn't really move. Plus, my soul itself, my very soul, was so exhausted that it seemed like there wasn't enough energy for me to move. And so all of these beings of light that were just around the sky started to come together and formed like a bubble around me, a bubble that was made out of light beings and transported me up and away to a place of re restoration where my soul got to be cleansed of all of that pain and grief and torture and sadness. Um, yeah, that was just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it was. And I remember you saying how you just felt like you were just so tired and exhausted from that life. It was like, I can't move. I can't. And then them just coming to your rescue
Mhm.
and pulling you up underneath in ways like you just couldn't move, like just being helpless and then being brought to that place of restoration. Describe what that was like, that place of healing and restoration.
Well, once I got to this just place that with no physical characteristics around that I remember seeing any kind of scenery or anything, just this place sort of in space. It seemed like then there was just one guide with me at that time. And there just became started this shower of golden particles, golden light particles, just showering down on me, just like a water shower would, but it was golden light particles. And as that came down around me, over me, and through me, the the sadness, the grief, the pain, the tiredness, all of that started to wash away. Just very similar to how it might feel if you came completely with your body covered in mud and you could literally see the dirt wash off of you. I could feel the all of that pain washing away. It was a very slow process at first. At first, it seemed like it went for several minutes before anything was happening, and then I could start to feel it wash away. And then became replaced then with some feelings of energy and peace and calm and good emotions came in with that shower of golden light after all of the negativity washed away. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it was very beautiful as you were describing it to me. And then from there, as you entered the spirit realm, you got to meet your guides. And you were describing that there was a number of guides, and then there were fewer and fewer. And then there were just six. Six very special, unique guides. Would you like to describe each one of them?
Yes, yes. Um, I was already aware of each of these six guides, but what I wasn't aware of, except for one of them, exactly who they were in my previous experiences. Um, and I wasn't always sure the meaning of the things that I was seeing happen with them. And so, um, how much do you want me to tell? Like their names and how they were connected to me? And
Yeah, how who they were, how they were connected to you, what was significant that you learned from each one? Because this was really cool. I like
okay,
especially with the coupled team. That was very interesting. So yes, go ahead.
okay, okay. So there were, first of all, the first four of the six have been around longer than the other two. The other two were fairly newcomers to my consciousness. Um, but okay, so let's just start with the four. Holly and Grace, and one that I call Dodie, knowing that he was from my Dodie ancestral line, but not knowing which Dodie he was, and one called Eltron from a different galaxy or something, different universe.
Mhm.
Um, Holly has always been the ringleader, the one that's got the most to say. I've become very familiar with her personality and the way that she communicates with me, and she's just really the main one that's always got the most to say. Grace is an older lady with the little short gray hair and the glasses, and didn't ever have much to say, but except she would be rather stern when she did have something to say. It would be just something along the lines of, I don't know why you have to ask me that. I think you already know the answer. Or, well, what do you think you should do? Just, make the smart decision. Those types of things. Um, really didn't know who she was. Then there was Dodie, and he was just always standing there, an older man with gray hair, with glasses, with the pocket watch, very sharply dressed. And he really never said much of anything to me, but he always radiated this feeling of like, you are you are seen, you are so loved, you are you belong. And just there was just always this fatherly, unconditional love coming from this one that I called Dodie. And then Eltron, like I said, a kind of a not not the way we would normally think of as human, from another galaxy. So what I learned is what my connections were with Holly and how we'd been in different past lives together. Um, Grace was my grandmother, my mother's mother, who my mom said she was always quite stern. And I recently came across a picture of her, and she actually looks a lot like the way that I had been seeing her. I never met her. She died about a year before I was born. So I'd only ever seen pictures, but I saw a picture of her, and yeah, that's exactly who Grace is, my grandma. Um, and a little quick story about her too is my daughter that's 24 now, when she was about 2 years old, we lived in this house in Utah where the dining room had a straight view to the front door. And we would sit during dinner, and in her little space in her high chair, she could see the front door. And she would, during dinner, she'd start waving and be like, hi, hi. And we'd say, like, who are you? Who are you waving to? And she'd say, to that little grandma that's standing at the bottom of the stairs by the front door. And she was never scared. She just always, and I said, well, what's she doing? She's smiling at me, and it was like very, very frequent that she was always talking about this lady. So I did some asking and realized, okay, that's her. That's who that was. And that was my mother's mother, Clara Doty. She was a Doty. And then the man that I called Doty was my grandma's brother, or my mother's uncle, who my mother adored. And my mother used to always say, oh, he would love you so much. My Uncle Claudius, he would have adored you so much. And he had so many of the same interests, live theater and music and reading and just a personality that for whatever reason, my mom would say, oh, he would have loved you so much. That's who that was. And then Eltron had always been like a kind of a mentor to me in other galaxies. And he would just confirm, like throughout this lifetime since I became aware of him, somewhere around 2009, he, ever since I've been aware of him, Eltron just like gives me guidance about big decisions, just to confirm or stuff like that about when I'm facing a big decision. He will sometimes gives me guidance on those things. So then these other two, this little pairing you mentioned, um, African an African king and an African queen. And I still don't know why African. That's part of my something I'd like to revisit and learn more about how I may have been connected to them specifically. But I asked them their names and they said that they could be named whatever I wanted them to. So I went with the first two names that popped in my head. And so I called them Rebecca and Erastus. And they both definitely show up as royalty. And I would just see visions of myself in their presence. And they were always anointing me, like in a way. Like sometimes like putting oils or things like this or symbols on my face or putting something on my head or something around my neck. And I didn't ever know until this life between life session what all that was. But every time they would anoint me or put something on my head or something around my neck, they were giving me power and wisdom and humility and love and peace and these different characteristics that I just needed and wanted to sustain me through this life with all of its heartaches and in the work that I do, working with people as a therapist, just giving me those characteristics that I desired and needed. Um, so yeah, it's just that it was really, really incredible. And I think the other thing that's really surprised me, and it was with my guides that the aha with this went on is, I'd always been told that in the spirit world, um, you just communicate telepathically. So, that was something that, again, on the cognitive level, I knew that, but it was something I couldn't really wrap my head around. Like, really? Like, how does that work? Like, how is that even really possible? Just because people say that's how it works, like, how is that even possible? But it just happens.
Yeah.
Like, a question would come in my mind. I wouldn't have to speak it. The question was received, and the answer was received with nobody actually speaking words, just thoughts going. And it was absolutely effortless, just effortless, and felt so natural too. Like when I was actually in that moment, communicating telepathically, just really, really felt like, okay, been there, done that, not a big deal.
Yeah, that is one of the really cool things about being in the spirit realm is just how effortless and how easy that communication is you get in there and it's like you just know and understand what the other person is conveying, but there's no like word process. It's really wild because
Right.
there's no like translating of words in the mind. It's just like this instant knowing. And then
Yeah.
there's to communicate this in words somehow because before it's just like boom, boom, boom. There's this understanding, this knowing that you don't have to piece words together. And it's
Yeah.
so,
Absolutely no need to ever say, so what do you mean by that? Can
yeah,
you
no,
describe that more clearly? No need for that ever. Just clear, beautiful, perfect download of thoughts and intentions back and forth.
yeah, it's
And so the
so,
mind blowing part about that was how easy it was because that was the thing that had me going, I don't see how that's going to really work, and yet so easy,
oh,
and that blew my mind.
yeah, oh, yeah. And you also mentioned with your guide Eltron that you'd had quite a few lifetimes in intergalactic planets and lives and was that
Yeah.
surprising to you? It's kind of like, oh,
Yes. Now there was one of the things that made me go, "Whoa, you kidding me?" Is like when I was wanting to know more about, yes, where Eltron had come in to my existences. I that's where I he said, "Well, I'm an intergalactic traveler with that portion of my soul that's not here in my body. That sometimes when I that a portion of my soul stays in the spirit world, a portion of it travels intergalactically, and then the largest portion, of course, is in my body, keeping me alive as Maria. But when I sleep, more of my soul can go to do the traveling and stuff like that. And so, so often, and I think that, what's true for me is probably true for so many other people, that when we wake up from those dreams where we feel like gosh, I was really there. That just still feels so real. I'm still feeling the emotions from it, and I'm still seeing the stuff in my mind. I came to learn that, yeah, because I really am going about all over the place. Pretty cool.
It is, and to think, yeah, we do have portions of us that are out traveling in our dreams and at night, and we can wake up and feel like, whoa, did I even sleep last night? Like, where was I? And I hear a lot of people describe this, like even in the womb, people will tell me, well, there's only a portion of my soul here, and I'm off here and there and wander all over the place. And
Mhm.
so I do hear that. And I think that's we're just kind of connecting the dots that, oh, not all of us here is here all the time. There's w- still aspects of us that are interdimensional, parallel, what, traveling through. There is no really time or space out there. So we're just, there's still parts of our souls that are just traveling and experiencing, and we're just not aware of it all the time, which is probably a good thing. But for you, you were able to tap into some of that awareness. Oh, okay, I have been traveling. These have been, I guess would you call it other dimensions or other galaxies? Or where would you
I
say
you
that
know, I'm not really sure that I could clearly define the difference,
that would
to
make
be very
sense?
honest. So, but definitely other galaxies. Because in my mind, I see it as just like so, so, so far away in terms of like how we measure distance. And just,
Yeah.
but of course, it only takes a thought to move
Mm.
between places. You probably already know that. So distance doesn't really make any difference, but the way that, we in our human form would measure that, it would be just like so, so light years away. But um, yeah, far off places. There's so many of them out there.
Yeah, I'm always curious to hear about the intergalactic journeys that, I mean, even Michael Newton was saying that he was coming across that more and more as he became
Hmm.
more experienced. He was encountering a lot more of that. And you also mentioned Rebecca and Erastus. One of the things that you were saying was, I guess Erastus was small in stature, and you were mentioning how there's like no hierarchy, and that that appearances don't really measure who you really are. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that was, again, Julia, there was so much about this experience that was served the purpose of taking something that I understand cognitively and making it very, very real. Kind of, I just think of it as like the difference in, you know, understanding the physics behind, what it takes for a rocket to go to the moon versus being in that rocket and going there. Kind of that, just that difference. So, um, yeah, I was curious as to why Rebecca was a very large woman. I don't mean obese, but just very tall, very strong, very muscular, a very physically powerful type of woman. And here was Erastus, who was a king, um, some tribe in Senegal. That one was really clear to me that it was Senegal. Um, and he was little, very, very little, very, very scrawny, probably not even 5 feet tall, probably a little 100 pound, 4'10", really, really little guy, and very, very old. And what I came to understand, because again, it was that here comes a download of information from them to my mind, is exactly what you said. is that, being small of stature or really, really old is not what defines how powerful a person can be. And anytime I say powerful, I always am referring to power to do good, power to uplift others, power to do the right thing. Um, it's the only kind of power I'm interested in. Um, so how powerful we are has nothing to do with the type of body that we are showing up in. And that a woman can be as powerful as a man, that those two things don't matter either. And even with that being said, it doesn't matter. She wasn't really more powerful than him, even though she was showing up large and strong. Just kind of, again, that difference between knowing it cognitively and then getting that immersive, I really get it now type of thing.
Yes, that is so, so very true of the life between live sessions. I hear people tell me all the time, like, I understand it, but now I know it because now I've
Hmm.
experienced it and I really felt it. Like now it's real. Like there's this embodiment sense of knowing. I just don't understand. I understood things, but now I have this really embodied sense of knowing it because I experienced it. And
Hmm.
that is that's so true of these types of journeys. Now you were also describing Holly was kind of the ringleader, so she was the one who was pretty much taking you through the journey of the spirit realm.
Hmm.
And you went and visited your soul group, your soul family, and describe what that was like moving into your soul family.
Well, there were a few things about that. Well, really only one thing about that that really surprised me. Um, was I figured based on what I've read about people who've had near death experiences and other people's experiences described in Michael Newton's books, that there would be a traveling through space experience, and there was. But what happened that really surprised me was she reached out to put an arm around me, and that arm showed up as this big huge wing,
Mhm.
not white either, like you would think in an angel, very, very colorful, which not sure why. Maybe Holly's personality is, whatever's worth doing is worth doing right. Beautiful color, just beautifully, beautifully colored feathers and this huge wing and she just wrapped it around me and we flew together. Just, and, um, and then I saw it seems like every place that we approached, I would see it upward and off to my left. I don't know why, but that's how I kept seeing it, upward and off to my left. And so we were going through the darkness in space and nothing's scary and it's just very calm and peaceful and Holly feels so familiar to me and we're just traveling and I see off in the distance what kind of looks like really tall buildings like the ones you see in the pictures of Dubai, these really tall cylindrical skyscraper, just the silhouette of them way off in the distance, and everything looks gold. And so we just very, very quickly come upon that, and we're there at the entrance of this place. And at first, before we actually walked through any kind of gates or official entrance, before entering the city, I looked around me and I just saw all of these different sceneries. And I honestly won't even pretend like I understand the significance of why I saw all of these, but just really quickly, I saw like a beautiful beach, which I love the beach. Well, I actually realizing I love a lot of nature. A lot of places are my favorite. Beautiful ocean and the beach, and then here's a beautiful like mountain and a meadow, and then here's a beautiful stream and a forest, and here's a beautiful like almost Tuscan countryside with the sunshine. I just saw, oh, and a beautiful, beautiful lush garden, like you would picture the Garden of Eden. Just beautiful, beautiful lush garden. Just quickly singing these different scenes. I don't know if there was a choice to be made, but we moved right quickly past that into It's like kind of like the gates or the entrance of this city. Oh yes, I remember now. See, when I went to Italy, there's gates that wall in the ancient cities, and the gate doors are there's walls, and then the gate to those they're huge, like huge, 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 like maybe as tall as 5 or 6 men. I mean, they're way, way tall. Um, and there were these big, huge doors like you would see in Rome, and those were the types of doors that we went into this kind of golden city, and then I didn't see a whole lot more other than a group of people. This time a little bit off to the right, up ahead and a little bit off to the right, just a group of people. And it was vague. Their physical characteristics were vague until I approached and got closer. And then but it's interesting how you just know stuff in the spirit world. It's like I knew who they all were, even though I couldn't see anybody's features until I got close. I still knew who they were. But as I got closer, I could see characteristics. And so the very first person that I greeted was my mother. And she was like the best mother in the whole world that anybody could ever have. I got to have the very best mother. And so, of course, my love for her is profound. And but she was very young. She was very, very young. She looked like she was in her mid 20s, and she was always gorgeous, like movie star beautiful in life, and she just was very beautiful, kind of just like the pictures I had seen of her in her 20s. And we communicated, of course, through the mind. And at first there wasn't really any communication. She just put her arms around me and she just held me, and I could just feel just like this love, just this profound love. And by that point, it was like I had almost completely forgotten all about being Jacob and freezing to death in this gulag. It was like that was no more like anything to do with what was going on there. And it was just like, just my mom's arms around me and just all of this love. And she just kept communicating, I love you so much. And it was like, yeah, I know. And it's wonderful to be here. And then I started asking her questions, if she knew how hard my brother and I had tried to fight for her. A big long story that I'm not going to go into now, but discord between me and my brother and some of our other siblings about my mom, and if she knew how hard my brother and I had fought for her. And the answer to almost every question that I was asking was, you already know. And at first, that was frustrating to me after I got that answer enough times, because it was like, well, I came here to learn new info, and I keep being told, you already know. But I'll get to why that is such an important answer. But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of other communication with my mother,
Mhm.
other than just this exchange of love and her joy at seeing me there, and just answering all my questions with, you already know. So what I kind of got, what I not kind of got from that, what I got from that is that as I've had ideas about what does mom know, what did she understand, what I thought was what it is. I thought she knew. I thought that somehow deep down inside of her soul, even though she had Alzheimer's, I had a feeling that something in her soul, she knew that that my brother Tony and I still loved her with all of our hearts, that we were trying everything that we could, that she knew, even though in her mind it didn't seem like she could know that. I just knew that she knew. And then when I got there and I'm asking her, she's like, you know. So when I'm in this embrace with my mom, I could see my dad standing behind her, practically jumping up and down with excitement of like, I want to hug you. I want to talk to you. Talk to me. Talk to me. And so I went and I hugged my dad and I asked my dad a few questions. Mostly about like, how did you know? Because he had a brief exchange about 15 minutes before he died with my oldest sister that really leads me to believe that he knew it was his time. And where he had previously said, "I'm afraid to die," he wasn't afraid anymore. He was very much at peace in telling my sister, "I'm not going to be here when you get back." And so I asked him, "How did you know?" And he said, "You already know. You already know." So this is where one of my big lessons that I learned was that, as my what I would tend to want to dismiss and say, "Oh, that's just your imagination," that my imagination really is spirit teaching me things. So yeah, that, and then there, my brother, my younger brother, that he was murdered, being stabbed to death in a park in California. He was there, and I asked him some questions about his passing. Did your spirit go out of your body before you felt the pain of all of that? And who came to greet you? And his answers were, "You already know." And then I saw one of my children. I'm not going to say too much on here in case, my children end up listening to this. I don't want to like out people who don't want to be outed, but I saw one of my children in a showing up in a way that was very, very different than how she shows up in this life. And that actually brought me a lot of and I asked her about some of her behaviors in this life and why she was showing up in the spirit world the way she was. And it put all of these like scattered pieces to a confusing puzzle all came together
Yeah.
through that experience.
Yeah. So you meeting your soul family in the spirit realm really highlight all of these dynamics that were playing out and really brought a lot of clarity as to why they were showing up the way they were showing up and your relationship between them. I think a lot of things you said, it just kind of made this full circle and things started to make a lot of sense and it was really clear. And that was also a recurring theme for you is that you already know. And that was like, oh, you can trust what you know. That
Yes.
that was like a big, meaningful uh takeaway that you gathered from you know, much of that journey through the spirit realm was reaffirming that you have the ability to know, that you have
Mhm,
intuition, that what you have been calling imagination is intuition, and
mhm,
that you can
mhm,
trust it. Uh, Also, I'd like for you to just describe to me what your ideas about what that would be like coming into the spirit realm and meeting your family and then what it actually was. And before you do that, I just also wanted to mention that in these Life Between Lives sessions, we do often meet family members that are still alive in this current lifetime.
yes.
When I did mine, I met with my Down syndrome sister and had a very intelligent conversation with her because we were able to communicate with their souls in the spirit realm, even though they're still alive in this current lifetime here. So I just wanted to point that out. But so yeah, just mention to me kind of what you thought it was like and how it ended up being different, similar.
Okay. Well, I did have preconceived notions about what it would be like. And where did I get those from? From listening to, reading Michael Newton's books, let's reading about other people's descriptions of what they saw, from listening to, podcasts and videos of people telling about their near death experiences. Um, I really, really thought that, I thought there would just be a whole lot more scenery, just a lot more visually, mind-blowing stuff. Because you know what? I hear all the time, we always hear people talk about there are colors in the spirit world that just don't even exist here. And we can't even comprehend what they are until we get in the spirit world. So, I was expecting to see things like that. And there was very little of that. And now the reason that I think that that's the case, and if I asked my spirit guides, they'd go, "You already know that that's the case," is because I probably would have been distracted by that. It would have put too much focus maybe and been too distracted by the amazing beauty of this or the amazing beauty of that when there was actually a lot to learn and a lot of places to visit and things to learn and discover more than just scenery. So the other thing though, because I miss my parents so much and because I love my parents so much, and because I was so everybody was so shocked by having my little brother be, murdered the way that he was. Um, had anticipated that if I did this life between lives and saw my family, that it would be emotionally just overwhelming, just an absolute emotional circus. And this was one of the most surprising things to me is that yes, there was emotion. And in fact, it seems like I remember when in describing my mom getting tearful and listening to the recording, I can hear my voice shaking a little. Um, oh, yes, there was emotion, but it was fairly benign and fairly calm. It was, again, kind of like that feeling of like, oh, well, like that realization of, I really built this up in my mind, but this is something that I've actually done so many times before, been there, done that. This really isn't all that big of this isn't really a new thing to me to be meeting my soul group and my family on the other side. And so, um, kind of an underwhelming emotional reaction to that when I expected it to be overwhelming emotional reaction.
Yeah. It's, I think we talked about it. It was just like, oh, it's just picking up an old best friend you hadn't talked to in a while.
Yes, yes, very much like that. I have my very best friend lives in St. George, Utah, and I'm in Northeast Texas, and so, I don't see her very often. But yes, when I do see her, yeah, it's happy and we hug each other, but I don't emotionally fall apart and we're not laying on the floor sobbing. It's just like, whoa, great to see you. Let's have a hug and let's start talking. So it was very much like how when you said yes, similar to meeting up with an old friend you haven't seen for a while.
Yeah.
So there were a number of, eh, in fact, of the ones that I was actually singing, this is kind of how my soul group presented itself is like this big crowd and almost like like stage lights when you've been to a stage play and maybe there's the stage is full but the spotlights are only on one or two people up front and the rest they're back there but they're kind of in the dark. That's sort of how it was. There was like quite a crowd of people but only a few were illuminated and showing themselves. And of those that were illuminated and showing themselves, more of them were people that are still alive on this planet than people who've passed away. In fact, the only ones that I really communicated with there or saw on the other side that have passed away was one of my sisters, whereas three of my sisters are on the other side now. One of my sisters, my little brother that was murdered, and both of my parents. Those are the only ones that were deceased that I actually saw. The rest were all it was my children, it was my best friends, my friend Christine, my other best friend Melody. Um, yeah. And so I wanted to know like where have our souls been together in previous lifetimes? And then I kept getting that answer of like, you already know. And that message of you already know was kind of there's sort of like two angles to that. One was trust trust what your soul is telling you intuitively, and trust what you keep calling your imagination and trying to dismiss as just your imagination. Start to trust that as truth. But the other part of that was, you can go inside and get more answers, all the answers you're looking for. Just get quiet, just get in the right headspace and heart space, and go get those answers, because they're all within. You already know the knowledge is all there. Just go get it. Don't spend time in this experience right now asking us to give you info that you can go look up yourself. It was kind of like that thing where it's like, people will go online and ask a question to a whole group on Facebook, where it's like, take 5 seconds to Google it and you're going to get your answer. Don't ask us, you can get the answer easy yourself. It was kind of that type of a message coming across in a loving way of just go get your answers,
Just kind of like one of those obvious truths, but now you really took it in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because to have an experience so profound as to be able to travel back to the spirit world and be told you already know, that's a message that has to be taken seriously. I'm not gonna get blown off in a setting like that. I don't believe that for 1 second, that I would come with some serious questions on my mind and then just get blown off, so to speak, because people are too cavalier to answer the question that you already know is just the way of like shutting me up. There's no way that that is what was going on there. It was a very, very important message that needed to get through to me through that experience that you already know. Very, very important message.
Hmm. Yeah. And after you met with your soul family, your leader, Holly,
Hmm.
you to meet with the council. Describe what that was like.
Okay. Well, she took me again under this beautiful wing and we flew. But then, I don't know what point she wanted to get across to me, other than maybe like, you're going to really like this. This is exciting, or it's exciting, going to be exciting for you, or it's exciting for me. But when we got to the place, before we entered the area where this council was, she started like flipping donuts kind of out in space with me, like going in circles, like just sort of this fun little, like, watch what we can do, like, hang on tight, woo, this is going to be fun type of a feeling.
Mm.
And she just did some for fun. And then we which really surprised me. I mean, I don't know, like, whoever anticipates there's going to be levity and teasing in the spirit world, but
A lot.
that's kind of how it was. Like, we can have fun and joke around here, and we can do donuts out in space. Um, and then we entered a space that was really obscure visually, really obscure visually. Um, just kind of everything looked white. The only real structures that I could see wasn't even really a full structure, just these big, beautiful white pillars, like a Parthenon, like the remnants of the Parthenon in Greece, kind of these big white pillars, in sort of moving into sort of an open air space that I saw no ceiling. And
Mm.
then it was just kind of a platform, like a stage, with this group of people sitting up there, like seated at this table. Everything's white, seated at a table, maybe about a dozen of them, more or less. Um, Everything just looking white. And they were all very obscure. I could see the outline, knowing that this was like the representation of a human being, but it was just like everybody was just everything was out of focus. Just there was nothing but white, and everyone was out of focus. Um, and Holly kind of held back a little bit, And I stood there for a minute, and I couldn't see anybody, but I still felt very, very calm. I mean, I couldn't see any distinct features on anybody. Um, and but I felt very, very calm. And then there was this moment of like, well, what do I do? Like, do they speak first? Do I speak first? And then immediately followed up with the thought of, you're just gonna know what to do. Just give it a second and you'll know what to do. So, and then one of them asked me to come forward. The only ones that communicated with me in that whole group were just the few that were right seated in the center. And again, it was all telepathic. At one point, one of them, I saw physical features. Just a man with an older man with a very round, very round head, and kind of a small of stature man with white hair and white mustache and white beard, kind of like a Mennonite, but short and trimmed. Just kind of a brief glimpse was all I got of him, and the rest remained obscured. Um, he just asked me to step forward, and so I did. And then there was just a whole lot that was communicated to me um, telepathically. There was nothing else to see. Nothing. It was just like this platform with the pillars where it was sort of almost just kind of out there in space. There was just nothing. And I do think it's because I would have been very distracted by all of that.
Mm.
Um, so they just communicated to me that they were proud of me. That was one of the very first things that they let me know, that they were proud of me because in this life, what I have done is taking the really difficult, painful experiences and ask myself, what do I want to learn from this? What kind of growth do I wish to have from this? And for a long time in my life, because of my religious upbringing, which I value, I was always asking the question, what does God want me to learn from this? And it's not that I have discarded that question, but about 10 or 15 years ago, it came to my understanding that the even greater question is, what do I choose to learn from this? What lessons do I want to take from this? And then knowing that God will support me in that.
Mm.
So they commended me for having made that a pattern in my life rather than saying, oh my gosh, poor me. Now I'm going to hate the world. Now I'm going to hate this person. Now I'm going to say I can't do this or I can't do that because this crappy thing happened to me or because the rug keeps getting pulled out from under me in various situations. To take all of those and just say, okay, how do I choose to grow? How do I choose to turn this into a blessing in my life? So they commended me for that. They acknowledged the difficulty of the lives that I've lived. That I have chosen a number of very difficult lives for different purposes. One being that I needed to karmically balance out having done lived some really bad lifetimes, some really, really like one in particular where I think I may have done the most damage was as um, a some type of ruler in ancient Egypt, not a pharaoh, but some type of a ruler, and I've seen those visions of it as a very effeminate male, um, but with the eyes painted like you see pharaohs and stuff. Um, and I had a lot of power, and that power was very corrupting to me. And I used that power in very bad and corrupt ways to hurt other people, to belittle, to degrade, to harm, just not a good not a good role to play. And so part of my reason for choosing um, difficult lives was so that I could understand that experience from the other standpoint with the shoe on the other foot. So I could, you know, get a feel of what it feels like to feel the way that I had made other people feel. Um, But another reason, though, that I chose a lot of hard lifetimes was because I wanted to get the most out of the experiences. I wanted to learn, I wanted these lives to really make a big difference in how much I learned and grew. Um, and not to say that I haven't had happy lives. This has been a happy life. There've been a lot of challenges, but when I was telling my son, like, about the most previous lifetime where I froze to death in the gulag, he was like, "Wow." He goes, "Things haven't been easy for you in this life, mom, but after that life," he goes, "you got a pretty cushy ride this time." And I'm like, Yeah, So it's not like I've had so this life hasn't been a horrible lifetime by any stretch of the imagination, even though there's been an awful lot of heartache and failure in this life. But I've had some other happy ones. In fact, I've had like 7 lives in Tuscany that were really, really happy lives, even though some of them were monastic and all kinds of different circumstances. But I was very, very happy 7 times in Tuscany, which is part of my just affinity for and love for Tuscany. Um, but they acknowledged anyway that all of the difficult lifetimes, and I asked if I needed to reincarnate again, and they said that I don't have to again if I don't want to. But they said, "If you want to, you can. You can reincarnate again if you want to, and you can live a life of relative ease with a lot of joy as long as you don't forget your soul's purpose, which is to be a light to others, and that you don't ever get, because you would maybe have an easy life if you choose one, that you don't ever start thinking you're, better than people. You got to stay focused on what you've learned so far. As long as you remember the truths that your soul has learned, you can come back if you want to for a relatively easy life." I don't know if I will or not, but
Now,
um
how did it feel to hear that or to know that?
like confirmation of something I already sort of knew. Um, but relieved, because I don't know that being a human is actually really easy for anybody, not even those with the cushy lives. I mean, that's why we got celebrities that commit suicide and get divorced, and I just don't. I don't. It's not. I don't. Human life life on Earth isn't meant to be an easy ride for anybody, and it's not. And so I think I'd, at least at this point, I think I'd rather not have to come back.
Mhm. Yeah, so this time that you spent with the Council of Elders, a lot of that was just reviewing a lot of different past lives. I remember you describing a lot of them, everything that
Hmm.
you learned from them, parts that you came away
Hmm.
experiencing through them. So it was really a time of looking through your soul from all of these past lives and all of the parts and putting together, oh, how has this made me? How has this helped me to grow and evolve? And how would you say that you feel about your life now in what you're called to do in your current lifetime from everything that you gleaned from being in the spirit realm, your time with your council, your family members, your guides? How do you feel about your life now, um, and your purpose and this time in your life? Like, what new reflections and insights has it brought to you?
Well, my council of elders actually came right out and affirmed to me that I'm on the right path. Like, what the things that I'm doing with my life right now, as well as, expanding it into learning from the Michael Newton Institute, and being able to guide people through sessions the way that you did with me. That's a beautiful choice. Um, it's not something that I have to do, but it's a beautiful choice, and that if that's what I wanna do, then that's also part of fulfilling my soul's purpose. And I think one of the things that I feel now that I didn't feel necessarily before is how highly supported I am. Um, my ancestors are around a lot that I wasn't really aware of until maybe even just the last year or two. Just a lot of them, and it's to let me know that I am protected, that I am supported, that things are the way just opens up for me. And I do have to say that in the last couple of years, and I have this little motto, and I laugh about it, and my kids and my friends laugh about it, but they also take it seriously like I do. Is my little motto is I say it's all rigged in my favor.
All right.
Because the more and the more that I really own that fact and say that and actually put that out there. I mean, I don't go around bragging and saying that to people. It's something I say in my mind and I say to those closest around me, especially when I'm facing a challenge or something that I want to accomplish and I can't really see my way through of how is this going to be possible. I just will say, well, it's going to work out because it's all in everything's rigged in my favor. And then events unfold that literally make it look like it's all rigged in my favor. I mean, to the extent that the people closest to me, my closest friends and my kids will just literally sometimes go, "Holy crap, mom. It's like it's all rigged in your favor. Like, how are you doing this?" And I'm like, "I'm just embracing the truth that's out there." And there's really nothing different about me than the people next door and every other person on this planet in terms of things being rigged in our favor. There's nothing different about me than everybody else, except for the fact that I'm aware of it and I embrace it and I live it and I perpetuate it by continuing to say that and mean it when I say it. And it could be a whole other interview, Julia, if I started telling you the things that have happened in the last few years that just make people go, "Oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding that that worked out for you." Like all those doors opened, all of these things fell in line that way. It's yeah, because it's all rigged in my favor. So um my ancestors are helping that to happen. I don't know how exactly, but I since this whole experience, I'm more aware of that being their purpose, of they're protecting me, they're helping to orchestrate events. They're, whatever, whispering in somebody's ear an idea that they've got, but that they're helping to make sure that when I believe it's all rigged in my favor, that it plays out that way. Because
So
even when the
sweet.
negative things, Julia, that happen, like I got into a really, really bad car accident in December of 2020, in 2022, a really bad one that could have killed me and my son. Consequently, and I'm not gonna tell you all of the events, but because of that car accident, the events that unfolded because of the car accident turned 2023 into a magical year of just unbelievably manifesting new experiences and all kinds of stuff that I look back and I'm like, "Well, where did all of this magic where did this all start?" Well, this wouldn't happen, this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened had I not got into that car accident. So even when disappointing, sad, difficult things happen, or you get fired from a job, or a family member disappoints you so bad, or some, what we think of as bad things, I still keep saying, well, it's all rigged in my favor. I might not be able to see today how, unlike on the day that that car accident happened. Okay, I can't see today how it's all rigged in my favor that I was almost killed on the freeway in Dallas, but I'm gonna know how this was all rigged in my favor. And it's, that's the truth of my life. And my ancestors are playing a big role in that. So I love them more than I loved them before. And they mean something more to me than just names on a piece of paper.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Isn't that comforting to know that you have that team of support that's with you? guiding you, showing you, watching over you, protecting you, but you're not really alone, that you've got this whole network. It's supporting you in your favor. It's
Uh-huh. Yep.
very comforting to know that and receive that and really experience the truth of that. So then let's talk about the very last experience that you had there, and that was going to the life selection, your journey into this sort of pre-birth planning of choosing this life. Describe that.
And that's not how it played out, which I understand now why. But anyway, we then moving from the council of elders to the life selection area, and again, I don't know why it worked this way, but there was no traveling with Holly, like flying through space. Just we were there instantaneously in a different place, and she was still with me. But there we were, and it was this place, that this big huge room that reminded me a lot of the circle vision thing at that they used to have at Disneyland, where 365 degrees around the room there's video and playing. um I didn't see anything, honestly, that had to do with why did I choose this body that I'm in now? Why did I choose to come to this family? Um, and I think that it's because along the way, through the other past life regression, even the ones before that, even before the one I did with you, through everything I'd learned in this experience in life between lives up to that point, I kept being told, you already know. You already know, you already know. And so, honestly, at the point of entering into that space, I already had received answers about why I chose to be who I am. I knew what was going to be difficult about the family that I was born into, and I needed this mother with her unconditional love. I needed a father who was not going to be abusive, but he was certainly going to make life challenging and cause me to have to grow and things like that. And these siblings that would, well, all of my negative experiences have brought me to the person that I am today, which I'm actually really quite happy with. Um, all of the negative experiences serve the purpose of causing me to, again, like I said earlier, to say, okay, how am I going to further grow from this? So, along the way of all of this, I was getting the answers to why this family, why this body. Um, Even my son pointed out, see, I'm like not a morbidly obese person, but even when I've been an athlete running half marathons, I've still always had this little layer of fat around my belly that just has never gone away. And my son said, well, I guess as somebody who's starved to death, he goes, it's probably, you probably wanted that comfort of just knowing that you were going to be all of your life in a body that's just always got a little bit of extra. There's some softness. There's just, it would take a bit for me to starve to death. Um, it's not a whole lot of extra weight, but it's enough extra. But see, even that, it makes sense now. Like I've always hated that it's just like never can get rid of that 10 extra, even though I'm like running marathons, can't get rid of that 10 extra. Now it makes sense, right? That's kind of probably something that my soul wanted. Like, put me in a body that's going to be strong, that's going to be healthy, that's going to have that little extra, and that I'm not going to worry about starving to death. And knowing that, I mean, and I'm getting older, and older people who've got that little bit of extra do better if they ever have a fall or they ever get sick than elders that are really thin and frail. So, anyway, I'd already gotten a lot of answers. So when I went into this life selection area, it was showing me other things that I still had questions in my mind about, like, why. because up to that point, one of my unanswered questions was, why did I love Tuscany so much? Why did I the very first time the only time I ever visited Tuscany, why I mean, I started to cry when I flew in and saw the dome and the over the cathedral in Florence, and I would sit for hours and hours in certain places and just take it in and feel it. I was like, what is this connection to Tuscany about? And in that life selection room is where I started seeing all of these happy lifetimes in Tuscany. A bunch of different scenes from my different past lives were flashing up in just little flashes. You know how fast it goes when you're watching a movie trailer? Just a
Hmm.
couple seconds of a scene, then another. That's what it was like. Just all these little brief 2 or 3 second flashes from these different lifetimes. But then I kept noticing that more than anything, though, there was Tuscany popping up all around. So then I kind of stopped to focus and I was like, oh, okay, look at all these awesome lives that I've lived in Tuscany. So that's not what I expected it to be, but that's what it was. And it was cool.
Yeah, it was really cool experience. And would you say that you got any glimpses of that space of life between now and the end of this life?
Well, my mom died when she was 92, and my died when he was 96. So I've always said to myself, I'm just going to meet somewhere in the middle and stay in this life until I'm about 94, but I'm going to be healthy. Um, And so I got that confirmation of like, yeah, you already know. Oh,
Mm.
you'll live into your mid-90s and you'll be healthy because number one, you got good genetics, but you're also taking your health seriously and paying attention to what you eat and your activity level and all of that stuff. And so that was I also though got a sense of that I would die quite happy, die like my both of my parents died, just Uh, my mom just died in her sleep, and my dad's heart just stopped. And he had DNR, and he was 96, and so that was it. He just went. And so that I would die, really peacefully like my parents, and that I would die happy with a sense of accomplishment of being able to go, that was a good life. That was a good one. That was the sense that I got when I was in that life selection room.
Mhm. And from all of this that you experienced and gathered, how do you perceive yourself as an eternal being and your place in the world and your family? Like,
Well, we've all got the two families. We've got the family we were born into, and we've got the family that we created.
mm,
So, the family that we were born into, when I reference my little brother and sister, that's actually really my niece and nephew that were raised with me. I'm the baby of the family at age 60. So, my siblings are passing away. And the ones that are left are, except for one, my dear brother Tony, that I'm closest to, except for one of my older siblings, except for him, the only ones that are left are some of those that like really hurt my mom and me and Tony in the whole thing when she had her Alzheimer's. So I feel actually honestly very disconnected from my family of origin. But with my family that I created, I have 4 kids. And this was something that each one of my kids communicated to me when I was in the with the spirit group was that each one of them needs something different from a mother, and that I'm there to that I can give each one of them what it is that they need most from a mother. And so that that left gave me a lot of peace because um their fa- the 3 of my 4 kids have the same father, and we got divorced when those 3 little kids were little. And because I wasn't able to raise them in a two-parent home, and because my kids had to do a lot of back and forth between mom and dad, which I always promised them they were never gonna have to do, I've there's been a self-doubt creep up as to have I been a good mother or not? Um, and my kids in the when the soul group met let me know that while no mothers does a perfect job, except for my mom, well, no mother does a perfect job, um, you were the mother that we needed. Um, the other thing, though, about that this experience really drove home something that really helps me in my work that I do is not only do I have private practice as a therapist, but I go to different healthcare facilities and I do therapy with people in these healthcare facilities. And I was already very inclined to see people more for who their soul is versus the body that they're in, because everybody's got something wrong with them or they wouldn't be in a nursing facility. Um, but I would always try really hard to stay cognizant of the fact that it's just like, okay, here's a person who truly has schizophrenic, but who is she really in her soul? And try to keep that in focus. But after this whole life between lives experience, it's like that whole idea is just much more illuminated and poignant to me. And it's easier to sit down with a person and get a strong sense of who they really are and not the broken body or the demented mind that they are in. And I've become more confident about sharing that with them. Like, for example, one of the patients that I see every week, he's only a 34-year-old young man who is in a wheelchair, not only from like an ATV accident that paralyzed him, but then he developed MS, and then he's got all kinds of mental health diagnoses. And um, sometimes he was really mad last time that I saw him, actually, just a couple of days ago, of like, I'm tired of just being a fat paralyzed slug that can only sit in my bed, and what did I do to deserve this? And I hate myself. I said, you're talking like you hate yourself. I do hate myself. I'm this, I'm not this, I'm not that. Naming off just all of his faults. And so I stopped and I told him a truth that I really believe. And I said, only the strongest souls choose a life with the challenges that you have faced. And you did choose this. And down deep inside, I know that you chose this before you were born. Not like on the day you got in an ATV accident that you were going, oh, well, I want to get in an ATV accident and be paralyzed for the rest of my life. Not that, but on a deeper level, before you got born, you chose the life that you are in now. And only the greatest, strongest souls choose a life with the challenges that you face. And this young man started wiping tears. And he just says, thank you for that. He goes, thank you for that. He goes, nobody's ever said anything like that to me before. And you've really, really given me something to think about. And he goes, you know, I just always feel so much better about myself every single time that I talk to you. And so, I'm more confident about telling people these things about themselves.
Mm.
Or like one older man who said, I keep seeing these little like flashes of light and I think I know what they are, but the nurses keep telling me that I'm crazy and they want me to take like such and such medicine. And I said, well, what do you think about the possibility that those might be angels, little angelic beings that are around you? Because you're not alone. You're never alone. You can't see them, but you got a crowd. of people around you all the time? And what if you're seeing little flashes of light because they want you to know that they're there? And he got so choked up he could hardly talk. This old man started to sob, and he started wiping his nose and saying, "Thank you so much." He goes, "Thank you so much." He goes, "That's what I thought they were. That's what I thought they were, and I couldn't tell anybody because they're gonna everybody's saying that I'm crazy just because I'm saying I'm seeing flashes of light, and they want me to take an antipsychotic, and I know I'm not psychotic." And he's like, "Thank you for that. That's what I thought they were." And it's like, before this whole experience, I may have been more hesitant to say those types of things to people, but I think everybody deserves to know the truth. And when I see like the bickering between a young woman who's got Down syndrome and another young woman who's got some encephalitis and shaken baby syndrome, and neither one of them have the cognitive capabilities, and they're bickering in a ridiculous way, I'm able to look at each one of them and say, wait a minute, these are beautiful, beautiful, great souls among us. This is what my self-talk.
Mm.
These two absolutely valiant, incredible souls, advanced souls, who said, I'm gonna have this experience. Pretty difficult life, but I want to have this experience of being stuck in a body that where the mind isn't working quite right, and I've got all of these challenges, and I can approach them with so much more patience and love. And I talk to them about, and I approach their behavior in a way of saying, like, you're way too good to be behaving this way. Somebody as good as you can do better. Let's try this, let's try that, and it solidifies my outlook that all human beings are like really, there's something so great and godlike within all of us.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. I, just the impact of having that eternal perspective of a life beyond this, meaning beyond this, purpose beyond this, that really much of what we go through is kind of minute and minuscule compared
Mhm,
to everything that we are. And
mhm,
when we can
mhm,
see that grand scheme of who we really are beyond just this little point in time that's so tiny, and our souls are so vast,
mhm,
so expansive, and so powerful, to think that we are so powerful that we would choose a difficult life, and to be able to come to a place and own it and know it and speak it and uplift people into seeing themselves for who they truly are beyond this little point in time. It's so small. We're just these big giant spirits. It's a beautiful thing to take away, really knowing and having that conviction, and to convey that to the people that you work with. Say, I
mhm,
see you. I really see
mhm,
who you are. It's
mhm.
probably the first time some of them have ever received that. You
It
know,
is. Many of them tell me nobody has ever told me that before.
and you're bringing that gift to so many people. What a wonderful thing.
I love it. I love it. One person said to me, "You are like," and I don't mean this to brag, but it's such a joyful thing. One person said, "You are like that person in the pitch dark who shows up with the lantern."
Yeah.
And
Yes,
it's
you
like,
are.
"Oh, wow, I yeah, I love it. And the thing is that I'm no better. I'm no better than anybody else. I just opened my mind and my heart to bigger truths. And like the whole thing about it all being rigged in my favor, that could be true for everybody. That is something that one of my friends asked me, is there something special about you, or is this something everybody can do? I said, this is something everybody can do. The only thing that's different about me is I'm leaning into it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like that lantern was just you take a little bit of peace from that place in which we come, then we can make that lantern brighter and brighter.
Mhm. I
And
love
you do.
that you said the word powerful when you said that me explaining to people that they are so powerful of a soul that they would choose into a difficult life. I'm glad you said that because I've been searching for the word of what to tell people,
Mm.
how I want to describe to them what it is that their soul is, that they would choose that life. And that's beautiful. It takes a powerful soul to choose in to those difficulties.
And what peace and meaning that brings for us in this life. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's
You one of the questions that you um, wanted me to address is who would I recommend this to? And I would say anybody who's ready to learn deeper truths. To anybody who finds themselves repeatedly saying to themselves, why does this keep happening? Why do people always treat me this way? Why do I keep doing this behavior that I want to change, but it's so difficult? When you just, anybody who keeps coming up against these questions that they don't have answers to, that's who I would recommend this to.
well said. So, all of you out there who are looking for those unanswered questions, let's take a
Mm-hmm.
journey in the spirit realm.
Mm-hmm. Contact Julia. Contact Julia. She's trained with the Michael Newton Institute and, of course, became a registered, fully accredited hypnotherapist prior to doing the Michael Newton Institute training. Incredibly um, intuitive and sensitive to the needs of the client that she's working with, that she's leading through this experience. Um, more affordable, a little more affordable than most, which is helpful. Um, Wonderful. Contact Julia if you want to have like a mind blowing, life changing experience. For
Oh,
real.
thank you so much. And I have
You're welcome.
immensely enjoyed this journey with you. I'm so happy that I got to take it with you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too. In fact, I'm really looking forward to doing a couple more regressions with you.
Well, absolutely. We can do that. All
Mhm.
right.
Okay. Thank you, Julia, for everything.
You're welcome.
All right.